So Karami is going to share with us, how long have you been homeschooling, Karami?
This will be my 13th year.
And so for those of us that are new, we were kind of laughing a minute ago about, sharing some ideas, being down the road homeschooling for folks who are just starting out, saying, I don't know what I'm doing. And of course, Karami and I are laughing, going, no, we never know what we're doing. No one knows what they're doing. So she's just agreed to share with us some of the things that she's learned, some of the things that experience has taught her, and some of the things that, she hopes you'll keep in mind as you start out and as you set out, and just what might be some helpful ideas.
I have to say that I am a planner. I like for things to be organized, and it's a gift. Like, I'm super good at it. Like, people will ask for my help. I'm really good at this. And so when I decided that I was going to homeschool, when my daughter decided when she was 8 that she needed to be homeschooled, and I prayed about it and she was right, I was going to do it right. And so I started making my plans and my lists, and everything was going to look perfectly and go perfectly, and the truth is that I wasn't just homeschooling her. I had all of my other children who were running around needy all at the same time, and also I was homeschooling me. And so I want you to be open to the fact that it's going to look different than public school. It's going to look different than the way that you were schooled. It's going to look different than maybe the way you were trained it should look. And that's totally okay. And, there were lots of successes at the beginning, happier kids and happier family, but one thing that I was missing out on was really listening to what God wanted for us that year. And when I was able to let go of all of my lists and my pride and it should look like this, and what if somebody asks what we're doing and my kids tell them that we're in our pajamas until noon? I'm not saying that's how I usually am. I'm just saying this is reality, and some days are going to be like that, and someone's going to ask your kid what they're learning, and they're going to be like, we don't do anything.
They will, and they will say that.
They will, and they're wrong. You're doing it. It's like when you sneak cauliflower into the mashed potatoes and they don't even know. This is what we do. But the most important thing is to really listen to what God has in store for you. And I'll tell you the difference between the first years when I started and the years when God would say, this is what you're going to do. And I would embrace it and do what God said. The way that we functioned as a family, the outcomes by the end of the year. I'm not talking about test scores or anything like that. I'm talking about the beautiful character outcomes that I saw in my children were so different. And the character that I saw in me, my reliance on God. So many examples. I have so many examples of this. One year, God said to me, you need to homeschool with Carrie, who is my husband's cousin, who happens to live 4.5 hours away. And I'm thinking, oh, yeah, okay. And I just kind of put it off. Like all summer, he kept telling me that. Well, we got to the very end of August. I still don't know what I'm doing. And he still keeps telling me this. And finally, I really prayed and said, okay, I hear you. What is it that you want me to do? And he unfolded this beautiful thing. And we called it Flying Ace Family School. And we had some things online, and the kids met over a Zoom meeting, and then we met once a month for field trips, and it was so beautiful. We had 4 different families in 4 different places, but we got together, and those cousins still have, this was the outcome, beautiful relationships. And my Carrie passed away 2 years ago and left her kids, who now have other adults and cousins that they can draw from. And those kids still come to me. I'm their aunt. I'm really their first cousin once removed, or by marriage, or second cousin, or however that works. But the fact is that I'm basically their aunt. And they come and they stay. They come and they hear stories about their mom. They come and they tell stories about their mom. You know, it created that, and God knew that we needed that. And another time, a different year, I was praying over one kid. I always write in my journal this kid, and just write down some things. And then I go a couple weeks, and then, okay, this kid. This is like something that I start beginning of the year or April or summer or end of summer, whenever it happens. You just write your kids down and you start filling out the list, and then a couple pages later in my journal, I'll do another list.
And the list is what comes from heaven about
about what they need.
Yeah.
Okay, so math, or they need math games, or they need this, or this certain friendship, or this certain curriculum, or spelling is going to be really important this year for this kid, or, you know, whatever, or this certain book, or read aloud in your pajamas, or popcorn movie day, or, you know, whatever, like whatever those things are, I write it down. And then I'll go, you know, and as I write in my journal, whatever, because I use my journal for everything, then I'm a few pages down, and another day I'm like, okay, so what are the things? And then I'll go back and look at the lists and see what has carried through. What came to me at the beginning that still keeps coming. It's that idea that still keeps coming. So one year, for my son, who, let me think of what age he was. He was probably about 10. And it was, he needs to go fishing with his dad once a week. He needs a paper airplane contest every day. And he needs to see math in a completely different way. And have to, like, I had seen this math curriculum called, I can't remember it right now, but it's about, like, you create theorems, and Emily Dyke is the name of the lady. I can't remember what it's called, but anyway, and so we did that. It's, you create your own theorems, and you start to think like a mathematician instead of just doing the calculations. So he needed that, and a once a week Adventure Tuesday where we went out and we had our little nature journals, and the kids would all separate, and we would have 10 minutes of quiet observation time where they could write or collect a sample and tape it in, or, you know, whatever. But that is what that kid needed. And you can say that that isn't curriculum, or that that's not enough, or whatever. But by then I was seasoned enough of a homeschooler that I knew God knew better than me, and I did it. And the crazy thing is, halfway through the year, that specific child ended up in public school. And of course the teacher, I mean, I didn't like tell her, oh, well, you know, we've been doing paper airplane contests and fishing, and, you know, but I didn't have to tell her. But, you know, when we got there, heaven forbid, he didn't know how to multiply 2-digit numbers by 2-digit numbers. And she was like, I mean, this is a problem. And I'm like, but why would he know? I haven't taught him. So why would he just randomly know that? He wouldn't. But it's okay, because we can teach him. Like, he's a super great learner. And I remember coming home from that and her telling me, you know, you did this the wrong way. Which I kind of have some pride issues about that. You know, I don't want to be doing it the wrong way. And I came home and I prayed about it, and I'm like, I did it the wrong way. And God said to me, remember that you did exactly what I said, and I promise that when you do what I say, then you prosper, right? And I had to take a step back and look at my son and watch him in the environment that he got thrown into, and watch him just rise inside, you know, and build character, but with such a firm foundation of who he was and whose he was. And that was, by the time we got to the end, that was his year to know whose he was. He was God's, and he was ours. I have these are my kiddos, and he needed to know whose he was. He needed to know who he was connected to in order to be in the situation that he was. It was not about the math, or the spelling, or the science, or whatever. It was for him that year. That's what it was about. Another year, my daughter, I prayed and said, what, you know, what does she need? And I didn't get the answer right away, but finally in like mid-September, I got, she needs writing education. She needs great women. She needs kindness education. And I can't remember. There was one more, but that was basically it. Writing, great women, and kindness education. So I totally had this. This was back before the story I just told you. Yes, the story I just told you.
Rewind the tapes.
Is my fifth child. This one was my second child. We were still listing it out. I was like, kindness education. I got this. I built the books we were going to read that had characters that were kind, or that learned about kindness somehow, like I had this whole thing. And writing, I'm like, yes, I have a degree in linguistics. Writing, I totally had that one. Great women, I started, researching who are great women, what are great women, what do great women do? And as we progressed in the year, this girl got really sick, and she sunk under the weight of anxiety, and I didn't know what it was. She had a stomach ache, we went to specialists, and by November, we knew that it was anxiety, and she couldn't go to primary, she couldn't go to church, she couldn't go to the neighbors, she stopped going to basketball, she didn't want to go to piano anymore, she, one at a time, these things started falling off. And I had to get her out of her bed and out with the family and trying to get her to do school. And, we struggled. I mean, it was such a struggle. And I promise you, if you're struggling, that you are not alone, that God knows you. He knows your struggle. He loves your child. And he loved my child. And he sent me my sister, who randomly ended up moving to town and would come and do art with her so that I could have an afternoon every week where someone else was with her that she felt safe with. It wasn't about the art. It was honestly about me having a break for a second. But I remember, we made it through that. Oh my gosh, she doesn't have anxiety anymore. I'll tell you what, I was just telling Marilyn, this is the girl who, when she was 17, said, for my senior year, I want to move to Manhattan, and she moved to Manhattan. I mean, she doesn't have anxiety anymore. I thought, this is because I ruined her or something, I made all the mistakes, because at the time I was taking credit for all the outcomes, the good and the bad. I don't do that anymore. All the outcomes are God's. But at the end of the year, I remember saying, God, you told me that she needed kindness education and great women, writing. And so why didn't you let us do those things? That's not what we did. And he showed me how she had to learn how to journal and how to say how she felt. The nights that my husband and I would sit there and go through the questions with her so that she would learn how to express herself and then write about it. She had a lot of social pushback from this, especially as she stopped doing some of the activities, and she learned about kindness education. She learned what it wasn't from the people who were not kind. And she knew who her true friends were, who stuck by her. And I said, what about great women? I never even got to talk to her about all of these people. And he said, did you ever leave her side? And I didn't. And he said, you were it. It was you. That's who she needed to learn about. And it was really humbling. But that the example that I showed in nurturing her was what great women do. They nurture where they're called. And I hope that those couple of examples can just show you that this is so much bigger than math and spelling and science and social studies. God is in charge. We are building character. We are working towards godhood. We're walking each other home to God, and he knows what our kids need at this moment. And is math important? Yes, we do math. We do science. I teach chemistry. I teach earth science. We do math almost daily, if not daily. We do music. We do, those things are important, but there is a bigger picture. And if you follow what God says, then he will show you these amazing outcomes. And it might not be in test scores or, but it will be in relationships. It will be in character. It will be, and academics will come. It all goes together. But don't be so focused on the academics that you, like I did at the beginning with all my lists. God would say, well, and do this. And I'm like, well, I can't really fit that in. I mean, spelling is at 7:45, and it just doesn't have to be like that. And so I guess that is my, what I've learned over the last 12 years is to turn the outcomes to God. Teaching from Rest by Sarah Mackenzie is an amazing book that
Absolutely.
you should read. It's only like probably
my
78
first book,
85 pages. Yeah, you should definitely read that book. This is, God knows what he's doing. I remember the year when he said, you need to do Family Jam. And I'm like, I am not musical. But I went to my friend and I said, God told me I need to do Family Jam and I'm supposed to learn how to play the guitar. So she taught me some chords and I could just be in the background strumming the chords.
And what is this? This is an event? What's Family Jam?
Yeah, so we all got together in our
Family Jam
library.
just means when your whole family plays an instrument.
Yes, everybody's playing an instrument.
It's not
so my 16-year-old at the time, the one who had anxiety before, and she's a pianist, she was just exploding with loving theory and everything. And so she needed the opportunity to write all these parts. So I would pick a song like, This Land Is Your Land. And it would have to be in a certain key because I only knew like G, C, D, and E minor.
You were just helping her out.
Yeah. And so she would put it in a certain key, and then she would, I had little violinists, and I had a cellist, and I had a flautist, and then Bryn on the piano. And
all
me on
started
the
up at the same time, or these guys are already going?
Bryn was already a pianist. Emily was already a cellist. Holly was already a flautist. Okay. My violinists were new.
Okay.
And so she and I would write the parts. And then we would all, we would sit down and we would work on a song. And the first time that it actually came together, I was like, somebody record this like this. It actually sounds like a song.
Get a camera.
And the fascinating thing is we started working on Christmas songs. Like all through November, we were playing Christmas songs. And then that year, Christmas happened to be on a Sunday and there was so much snow, we couldn't go to church. And we sat in our library where our piano is, and we played Christmas songs for that was our worship that morning. And now we're all used to worshiping at home, right? But we weren't at the time. And it was this beautiful, sacred moment where we just had, we all were playing together. And our son was home from college then, and he was kind of learning the guitar. And so he would follow what I was doing on the guitar. And it was beautiful. And God orchestrated that whole thing, and he does. I had these kids that I was teaching last year. I had 11, 14-year-olds, and they were, at the beginning of the year, we always, in that class that I've done before, we start with the Odyssey, and then the next book, I really felt like we needed to read The Wind in the Willows randomly at the beginning of the year, but I couldn't fit it before the Odyssey because we study Greek thought right then at the beginning, and so it didn't really fit right then, but I knew somehow The Wind in the Willows. So after we finished the Odyssey, I'm like, okay, now? And God's like, no. So we read a different thing, and then the beginning of the year rolls around, and he says, now, The Wind in the Willows. So I send
in this class of 14-year-olds.
So I send this email out to all these moms, and I say, The Wind in the Willows is our next book that we're reading. We start it, and one of the moms sends me a text and says, did you know that BYUI is performing The Wind in the Willows at the end of the month? And we finished the book, and we were able to go and watch this amazing performance. They did such an amazing job. The person who did Toad was amazing. But it was, I mean, God just orchestrates little things like that. They're small, but it was amazing that, you know, and then, right, of course, we're writing about it. I mean, that's what we did in that class. You know, we wrote about comparing two of the characters, you know what I mean? But they had read it, they had seen it, we had talked about it. It was just beautiful. And God does that like over and over and over to me. Like the year before that one, or 2 years before that, when I was doing that same class with my daughter Emily, and right before Christmas, we get to this point where they're mapping the stars, and all of a sudden we're talking about a new star, and I realized that the only way that they could know that there was a new star is if they had mapped all the stars. And that's where science was at the time, right before Christ's birth. And God orchestrated that for that class, for my daughter Emily, you know, that came before that, the next class with the wind and the willows. You know, there's just little things like that, and God just slips it in. And now I'm probably just rambling, but I just want you to know that God is in charge and that you can trust him. And so pray and follow what he says, even if it's different than what the world says or what, it's okay. Follow what he says, and the outcomes will astound you, because they won't have been driven by you. They will be God.
I keep thinking about Nephi building his boat, not after the manner of men.
Yes.
Not after anyone ever did before, not after he'd ever seen before, but strictly after God's. Can you tell us a little bit, Karami, about the process? Like for you, as you're listening, as you're hearing him, what kinds of things are you doing? This is, in the summer, you say you're studying scriptures, maybe out on the
porch swing in the morning with the new puppy running around. I'm on puppy duty in the morning. Everybody else is still asleep, and it's my time that I get to read and study. I think it is also just about sincerity, about really wanting to hear and being open to what God really is going to say.
Being a seeker.
Yeah, really being a seeker. And me being willing to write down those things that the things that I don't feel like I am even capable of, you know, like learning the guitar, or when he said, and next year you're going to teach chemistry. And I'm like, I mean, I had it in high school and I liked it, but really, but being open and being like, okay.
The courage to write down.
Right. I can find out how to do that. I can figure, you know, I can accept that that's what you're saying and ask you to lead me there, you know? Really, for me, it's a lot about writing. I do have to write everything down. I write down the thoughts that I have, and then I come back. Sometimes I don't.
You have your journal open while you're studying scriptures, while you're praying?
Yeah, usually.
Take the notes as you're listening to what heaven has to say.
Yes, there was one time, I do have to say this. This is the time with the schooling with the cousins. And I was on my way home from an iFamily meeting, which happens to be about, 40 minutes away from me. And so I had been like, I don't know how you expect me to homeschool with people who live so far away from me. But I was driving home from that meeting, and I had been praying. I had finally opened myself up, because it's the end of August. I'd finally opened myself up to, okay, what do you really mean by that? What do you really want me to do? And I'm driving home, and the Spirit said to me, I'm ready to tell you, so you might want to pull over so you can write this down, because I always have my journal with me. So I pulled over into a parking lot. I got off the highway, pulled over into a parking lot, and I just start madly writing all of this stuff down, all of this stuff. And I was like, this is amazing. And then I turn on my car and I go to get back on the highway, and the Spirit says, now that you have all of your thoughts out, are you ready for mine?
I've got some ideas too I want you to consider. Oh my lands.
I pulled back over into the parking lot, and it was honestly just one little diagram. And that was it. And all of that other stuff that was going on in my mind wasn't what God intended.
But probably helpful for you to write it down.
It was helpful
and
for
get
me
it
to
out.
just write it down and get it out. It freed my brain up for that one little thing. And when I got home, I called Kevin's cousin and I said, do you know what you're doing this year? And she's like, no, I'm still waiting. I've been praying. God says that there's something great. And I'm like, and this was her first year homeschooling. And I said, I've got it. I have this, like, God showed me this little picture, and we're supposed to homeschool together. And she's like, awesome. That's great. I'm so happy. I can totally feel that that's right. You know, she had been talking to me all summer. What? I need some help. I need some, you know, and I had just doubted and been like, I don't know what, you know, but writing down definitely helps me, and just definitely being prayerful and being open. You have to be sincere and open for what he might say. And I'm not saying that it's not hard when people say, well, what about socialization? Well, how do you possibly feel like you can meet the needs of every single one of those kids at every level? How do you even do that? And strangers feel that they must tell me, because I must not realize.
Yeah, they're feeling the same pressure that you're feeling, right? That I'm feeling, yes.
Right.
And they're asking you, and what's your answer to that? Because I don't have an answer, basically, is what they're saying.
Well, and honestly, it's people who weren't seeking.
Oh, sure.
These are just people,
the doubters and the naysayers.
Right.
Yeah.
The guy at the post office and the person in the line at the checkout who's like, why isn't your kid at school right now?
Yeah. It's all doubt and fear.
Yes. And they're telling me, you know, you must not realize that you're actually, this could be really harmful for them. And that's real. And I am sometimes a prideful person, and it hurts, and I doubt, and I struggle, but it comes down to that I trust God. I trust him with my children, and I trust what he tells me. And, like I said, sometimes I write things down and I have to go back and see, okay, what has stayed? Because so much of it is me creating my lists and my organization. And so I like to see what, over a bigger period of time, it doesn't usually come to me just all at once, like, okay, God, I'm ready now. Tell me what we're doing. It's more of a process, and me kind of weeding through my own thoughts and fears and ideas for a child versus what God actually has in mind for them.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Karen.
Mm-hmm.